Welcome to Rock and Roll Fridays, a podcast on musical encounters and life.
Welcome to Rock and Roll Fridays, and I'm so happy that I have a guest, so I don't have to talk the whole time. We don't use last names on Rock and Roll Fridays to protect the guilty, so if Matt would like to use his last name, that is up to him. But we have local South Jersey legend Matt with us today on Rock and Roll Fridays. And the great thing about Matt is he's a storyteller, he's a musician, he's a lover of music, and we're going to talk music today. So hello, Matt.
Hey, it's great to be participating in this. Appreciate
Awesome.
you having me.
So everyone, we talked earlier, everyone's got a story. We always talk about stories on Rock and Roll Fridays, right? Music is about entertainment, life, words, sounds, but usually it's about experiences, either meeting your bands, meeting people at shows together, getting excited to go to shows, right? Tailgating, et cetera, et cetera. The cool thing about you is you're a fan and you're also a musician, right? So you kind of see all ends of it. But I know you have a starting cool story about meeting someone who unfortunately passed away recently, and that is one Frederick Nathaniel Toots Hibbert of Toots and the Maytals. So tell us, how did this come about?
So I guess to your first point, I'll say that I became somebody who plays in bands by being a fan of a band. Back when I was in college, I was right after I finished college, I was fortunate to join a local ska band called SGR. They were the pride or bane of Voorhees and surrounding areas, depending upon how you saw it as you went to Eastern High School at that time. But those guys that I had gone to see, I ended up meeting one of their horn players my very first day at TCNJ. He told us he was in a band. We went to go see him at the Cadillac Grill, RIP, on South Street. And from then, when I graduated school, we had become friends over the last 4 years. We'd gone to see them play at the Warped Tour, gone to see them play various shows in Philly. And then they had a lineup change, and they were looking for a new singer. So I auditioned, and then I got to join those guys. So I was living the American dream at one point of being an unemployed college graduate living with his parents and playing in a touring band.
That is very interesting for the day, like the current days, right? Except for the touring band part, right? There's probably a lot of unemployed college kids living in their parents' house right now.
Well, I think it's funny because back when we were touring and now, the similarities are that gas is cheap enough that you could throw a bunch of dirty guys in a van and drive across the country a little bit. I don't know that it's safe to in pandemic conditions, but I would say that at the time that was a big selling feature, because there's a period in the interceding years where touring was expensive just because getting around is super expensive. But before that started, not much before, was when 2001, my friends and I, right after I graduated college, took a trip down to Austin for the Austin City Limits Festival.
Awesome.
And I'm not sure if it was technically the first or the second year that they were doing it back then, but it is many years hence. And so it was in Zilker Park, and it was definitely the biggest festival I'd been to as a 21-year-old guy. And it was huge. And Austin is such a beautiful city for music. They have tons of their own local heroes, as well as, major acts from across the world.
Yeah,
coming to Austin for that.
And you were there. You were at Austin City Limits probably during the time when Austin City Limits was the major concert, but then the bands went into the bars and kind of played after party shows and kicked around, where I think nowadays it's probably a little too big for those moments. But that's awesome.
Sixth Street in downtown Austin is renowned for just having so much live music busting at the seams that I wouldn't be surprised. South by Southwest goes down there now. There's loads of festivals where those venues could have literally anybody in them, and that's kind of how it felt, being there too. We actually managed to sneak into a show by a band called the Scabs that were like a local band fronted by a guy called Bob Schneider. He had some solo efforts that made 88.5 around here. Nice songwriter, singer guy. But it was at a club called Antone's, and they had a residency there. So they were, you know, one of the daytime bands at ACL, and then we were just going up to try to sneak into the venue because we definitely didn't have tickets. It was completely sold out. And I remember bullshitting my way past the security guard, like swearing up and down to my mother and whomever else that Bob Schneider himself had left us tickets or put us on the wait list. And the guy wasn't having any of it. And then in the middle of this somewhere, Bob Schneider walks out and he's like catching a cigarette. And I'm like, look, there he is right now. Bob, what's up, man? And he just kind of looked at me. He was like, oh, hey. I was like, can we please do this now? And the guy ended up letting us in. And of course, we got put on the list.
Awesome.
For no reason at all. And got to see a show we had no right to be at. And
That's
snuck
awesome.
our friends in through the side door too. So it was hilarious. But at the same place, it felt like it was just so possible to meet anybody who was there, because it being a music town and a college town, I feel like anybody who came down to Austin was really up for mixing it up with like a crowd of people. So
yeah.
I shook Rhett Miller's hand. I shook Ryan Adams' hand through a fence. This is right around the time that he dropped the single about I Still Love You, New York. And then I met Rhett Miller and Murray in the Old 97s, who are another big
good band, yeah,
that I love because they were signing stuff. But the highlight for me was meeting Toots Hibbert. And this was before really I even had as much education, as to who Toots was. But it was still so important to me, and became even more important in the years that rolled on, because my band picked up so many of songs by the Maytals, and it kind of bummed me out because he passed recently, and so many people just don't know who he is. And he's the guy who invented the genre of reggae.
Yes.
And the word reggae itself. So.
And for people out there that don't know, I mean, he was a Jamaican singer, songwriter. He had a 1968 song, Do the Reggae, which is widely credited as the genesis, to your point, Matt, that where the name reggae came from. So if you
regular people, that's what it's for. That's what reggae is.
Yeah, and people, when they listen to obviously Bob Marley, but when you get Toots and the Maytals, it's like the start of the start, if you will, in the reggae area. So
yeah, there was a lot of Motown and soul music coming off the Florida coast into Jamaica, and there was roots music and there was ska, and Toots brought it all together with a gospel element, because he had that resonant church voice that he brought to everything. I was discussing this with somebody I met the other day, and so the guy just pointed out, like, he sounded the same at the end of his career as he did at the beginning. Like his voice didn't falter. You always knew you were going to get that deep, soulful performance from him. And he just wrote so many songs that became sampled and picked up and mixed up and thrown around by tons of artists after him.
Yep.
Let's talk about most recently. I think everybody remembers how Pitbull ran with that Fireball song. Well, that's Funky Kingston. Just that up, The Clash, The Specials, and I can't even think of who else, second wave ska bands, all picked up Pressure Drop, which Toots and the Maytals song. The most famous one is probably Sublime, Bradley Noel picking up 5446 Was My Number. Everybody knows that. That's about his bust for weed possession, which is a highly controversial policing circumstance under which those guys grew up. His whole, when I met him, the album that he signed that I bought from him was called True Love. And the whole thing is a comp of duets with amazing artists like Ryan Adams, Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, Trey Anastasio, Willie Nelson, Bootsy Collins, The Roots, Rachel Yamagata, Bunny Wailer.
These people wanted to play on the album with, right? When you do a duet, it's, I want to play with that person, right? Whether it's Tony Bennett, Johnny Cash, whatever, right? So
no doubt.
How did you meet him? What were the circumstances? How did you kind of have that interaction with Toots?
Yeah, so it's the kind of thing that, again, I think it will only happen in Austin. It was basically just, there were periods of time when the bands were in the merch tent, and if you wanted to come buy their stuff and you hung out and you were there when they were there, you could go and just meet them. And so my CD is signed by Toots, and I shook his hand, and I got to actually meet the man and see him on stage that day. And now that I think of it, I think it was the 2002 show, because 2001 was the first year we went down, and then we went back the very next year, and I think it was 2002. That album became such a favorite for us because when I joined the band that I was in, we played all that stuff. We were a third wave ska band that played originals and covers and so much reggae, so much ska. And that album of duets and covers of his own work with Maytals, it's so beautiful and it's so well done. And I just know that how many other people I turned on to his music by playing that album with them in my car or pointing them to it on a digital format or something like that. And, again, he just, when you're, the thing I've always found about musicians is the ones who are the best have almost no ego. They have enough of an ego to do their thing and be confident in their performance. But so many people are worried about where they fall in somebody else's orbit that they can become competitive or combative.
Yeah.
However you want to discuss it. There's people like, without, calling anybody out, there's people who are known for their outbursts and there are people who are known for their chill. And Toots was just sitting there, just saying thank you to people and sharing, a little moment with everyone. And
the Jamaican weed probably helps too.
I mean, if you're predisposed to it, you can tour around the whole world and still pick it up,
Yeah.
But he was bringing some of that out to us. And I think this is before Rachel Yamagata was maybe as known as she is, because he brought her up on stage to duet with him.
Right.
Sure, he knew that everybody knew who she was,
Yeah.
And I feel blessed because all of the songs that, we play with my band, the Hackbeats, have become, our way of doing them, but we wouldn't have them without Toots and Maytals. And I think that they set the blueprint for what the Wailers ended up doing, where you have a lead vocalist and some high harmonies with some backup singers, as well as, the percussion that goes along with that. And so I just really, really sad to hear when he passed, really, really sad to think about the other opportunities I could have had to see him play live again, but so grateful to have had at least one moment with someone who was so influential to my own listening. And and it was awesome.
And it's awesome. I mean, I think, for people that don't know, there was a span like early 70s to early 80s, like obviously Funky Kingston is like a classic, right? Reggae Got Soul, Pass the Pipe. Those are kind of the three trilogy albums in the late 70s, early 80s that, like, if you haven't listened to it, those are like go-tos immediately.
Listen, even if you're country fans, you can listen to his cover of Take Me Home Country Road, where he sings about take me home to West Virginia, take me home to West Jamaica.
Yeah.
Like he's got something for everybody. And the Willie Nelson duet is part of that too. Like there's so many different kinds of songs that they did that it fits a party. It fits a different vibe. He did stuff with Radio Dread, the reggae cover of Radiohead album. Just listen to his voice. He never lost steam. Is just a soulful presence that really, I feel like, let people understand, connect with him directly, his feeling in those songs.
Yeah, and I think you
kind of thing.
I think you mentioned it too, right? I think there's certain bands and certain artists that the live experience of touring and playing, it's like they bring it, and they know that crowd that night is there for that experience. And obviously these guys were, and Toots and the Maytals were that kind of band where it's like, whether it was 2000 or 1978, right? They were going to bring it. And for that crowd, you were going to have an experience at that show. Right. And you can't say that for all bands, right? There's just certain bands where that live experience is just kind of above par all the time. And this group was one of those bands.
Well, it's funny because I think after I saw him there, the closest I came to seeing him again live was when we were flyering for one of our own shows outside the TLA on South Street. And I remember, we didn't have tickets to the show, but we were standing outside at the end to just kind of, hand out flyers back when that wasn't against the law in Philadelphia. And just hearing them rip it in, on the other side of those doors, it was just like, we should have bought tickets.
Right. So that is awesome. Meet and greet, like musical encounter. Very cool. So one of my favorite quotes is, music is the ultimate truth, right? Jack Kerouac. And I don't have to tell anyone out there, if you haven't read Jack Kerouac or know about Jack Kerouac, you should check him out along with Toots and the Maytals. So I ask you, Matt, what is your ultimate truth with music? What makes music the thing for you? What is the thing and the reason why you do it, see it, play it, hear it, engage in it?
I will say it's connection. I think live performance is direct emotional connection between two people, and it doesn't rely on being able to be described in words. When you experience something that you resonate with in the audience, it is immediate, it's ineffable, and it's true. You just know inside of your body and your heart that what you're having is a true moment. You can ask yourself the questions around that, and you can make something of that you feel reflects your outlook on life. But it puts someone else immediately into your heart space, if you want to call it that, where they get you and you get them. And as a performer, as an audience member, it's that exchange of energy between the stage and the pit, or the crowd and the stage, that provides the thing that is created by all of us together. And I feel the same way about playing music. I'm a singer. I play some percussion. I don't have the ability to play a piano or a guitar or a different instrument that would, help me mess up the cut less when we're all getting paid at these things.
Right.
But I feel like when the band is creating something together, it's a shared experience. It's a shared moment. Those people in that place doing that thing, making something happen, and it is pure. It's really clear when it's the best.
Yes.
And when you get to the place where you're past practice, you are actually becoming artistic. You get to take that innate stuff and turn it into something interesting.
Well, and I concur on all comments. And it's almost like, as a fan, unfortunately, I am not as skilled as most people on the playing side. Although I will say, what you just described, when you hit a 4-chord song in your own right and you nail it, there's a feeling that you can't explain to your girlfriend or wife or husband, that I did it, right? Like, I hit the chords, it sounded right, it sounded the way I wanted it to sound, and it felt good. And I think a little bit of what you're describing, what I call the head nod, right? You're at a show, you don't say anything to the person you're with, and you just both have that feeling and look that this is awesome. We're in this place together. The music is amazing, and it's just feels right. And I always remember so many shows where there's nonverbal communication between the crowd, but they're all nodding yes.
It's a shared understanding. It's the most direct form of communication I can think of. And I'm somebody who, like you, deals in words, and even in images. It's still more direct than that. And it's the thing that I feel that, this will date us, when you listen back to it, but during this pandemic, it's been such a drag, because a lot of people who may not have that connection in their lives directly most of the time can get it at a show.
Yes.
You can feel like you are on the same vibe as other people in your species just by sharing a moment of expression.
Yes.
And so with that being taken away, like, I had band practice last night for a gig coming up in October, and it was just so nice. I definitely wasn't, the sharpest I could have been, but it was all right. And I think everybody else there kind of felt the same. But afterwards, we were just all hanging out for like another hour anyway, because we were all so happy to see one another, and so happy to
play music
there and make something.
Yeah. And the other thing about music, it's I always think this, right? There's no algorithm that can say all the chord structures, all the music in the world has already been created, right?
Right.
Like, there's no the unlimitless possibility of creating something, right? Whether it's your band or me with a piano and a guitar and a home studio, right? Like, or, a cappella singers, right? It's unlimitless. And there's not many industries, arts, creativity, working environments where that is the case, where
And it's different every time, which is the other thing too. Like
yeah,
whatever you do, like our practice last night was last night and it's done. When we step on stage, it'll be whatever that is that time. When we practice again, it'll be whatever it is that time. It's all about giving you, I think, especially nowadays, giving you a place where you exist so immediately, you in the moment with
yeah,
someone else. You're all working towards something together and individually,
yeah,
and you're working to make something. Because
yes,
I have to say, the older you get, the thing that most becomes important, particularly at practice, is competency. Like if some bands have practices that are like AA meetings of people who are losing their chips
right,
tomorrow. And some guys have practices where it's super technical and super intense. And sometimes guys get to just go in and jam and see what happens. But if you show up and you are playing to the best of your ability, it makes the guys around you tighten up and play harder and better and all the rest of that stuff too.
right,
So there's that piece of it. There's camaraderie and kinship and, sharing, again, a thing that you guys make together. But I also feel like the other piece of it is that you learn something every time too. Like you're like, okay, I could do this differently, or I could play with this, or I hit this wrong. I need to beware of that, or change my structure, change my form. Somebody broke a string, somebody dropped a stick, whatever. It's
right.
different every time.
It's awesome. Um, let's transition to, you're not only a musician, but what you do also for a living is New Jersey Penn. I mean, we're both New Jersey guys. Obviously, the news, the media, local, like New Jersey Penn is a local news outlet for South Jersey. Media during these times is so important, not only with COVID, but the economic times, the election coming up. Information is so important, and also just point of view, right? And transfer of knowledge, and where you get information, and trusted sources, right? So, in full disclosure, I see Matt at the coffee shop writing articles, I'm doing work, and it's nice to know that local, there's resources and people out there that are trying to find the truth, right? I mean, that's journalism at its heart, is finding the truth and writing about the truth.
I think the most important thing to be in news at this time is accountable and as nonpartisan as possible. I like to say that we cover policy, we don't cover politics, but it's a job that makes you stay in integrity. People rely on you to be accurate. They rely on you to be timely, relevant, and also to be clear. So I like, I'll say that during the pandemic, we lost about 6 gigs that were otherwise canceled, that we would have had. And I'm fortunate enough that music isn't my sole source of revenue, because there's loads of musicians who have been really, really hard hit. And beyond them, the venue owners and the
Right.
security, concessions, alcohol people, all those folks who go into putting on a show. So, during the pandemic, as difficult as my job has been, I've been lucky to still be able to do it. And there's more news now than ever. There's plenty to talk about. But I appreciate you talking about it, because I think that the most important thing to me in doing local journalism is living where I work and not parachuting in, being accountable to the people that I'll see at the coffee shop, see on the street, see, in the neighborhood. And in terms of how I do my job, just connecting the people who live in the place that I live with what's happening there, and letting them know stuff that they might not know about from 5 minutes away. Because
Right.
I believe, especially now more than ever, having clear, vetted, reliable information helps people make good decisions. We're not gonna, there's plenty of places you can go to get punditry and commentary and hot takes, and I promise you I don't do any of that. My website doesn't even have a comment section. My
Right.
interest is just in being a place where you can get clear, reliable information. And I think that's the most important thing you can do to be accountable to the people who read you.
And I think the other thing, and this was a, on a different scale, when the internet first kind of arrived, if you will, we never had the ability, and I utilized this on the sports realm, right? All of a sudden, if the Philadelphia Eagles were playing the Dallas Cowboys, I could read the Dallas local newspaper about what they were saying about the game. And
That's true.
just like, the website is njpen.com. I urge everyone to go there because it's nice to know local community information, even if you're not from that community, right? Like, even if you're not from small town America, right? We're out, South Jersey is always associated with Philadelphia, right? We're always grouped in. But there's a large portion of South Jersey that is its own entity and is a small town, right? It's Main Street 101. And I always think that it's interesting for people that aren't from different areas to read about what's going on in South Jersey or maybe a small town in Florida, because it affects us all at the end of the day.
Well, if you follow national news, every national news story starts in someplace. And so that's why whenever I'm looking for coverage or something, I always go to the most local paper writing about it. Everybody who loves to watch, your cable news and your TV news and your evening news should know that those guys just churn up the stories that people at the local papers write every single day about the stuff that happens around them. And if it happens to become something that becomes nationally interesting, then all of a sudden, where do they go for all the information? I know that my work has been read by all the other people doing my job a step above me in a bigger organization. And the blessed thing about how I do it is I don't have a boss and I don't have anybody else to answer to. Because
Right.
I could go work at one of those jobs and get cut for salary or insubordination or merger buyout or whatever else you want to say and be no better off than I am today. So
But that means you're doing your job, right? When those organizations are reading your content and seeing your content, that means the stories and the people and the places you're writing about are being looked at, right?
completely.
Yeah.
As
So,
edifying as that is, it the thing that makes it all work is when people who live near you decide that they're going to pay to subscribe. Because I did it for free for 5 years. We gave the content away. Last year, we switched to a paywall, and I hate the term, but I understand the necessity of it because even close friends of mine would be like, "Hey, I've been reading it every day, but I didn't know there was a way to give you money." And I was like, "Well, thanks. I'm sorry I brought it to a point of crisis, but I appreciate it." And so, whoever you like, whatever you do, wherever you live, support somebody who you believe in because information is just as important as anything else. I believe, the news could be like a public utility if we were a different kind of country.
yeah.
Because
And that's the value exchange, right?
agreed.
Saying the word paywall, if there is value in what you do, right? And I always believe this, where you spend your money is your value system. I mean, at the end of the day, right? You take $100.
In America, that's totally true.
Where you spend your $100 is, it's like, take a hard look at yourself. Like, where is my $100 going? Is it going to this, that, or the other thing? Matt, it's been awesome. Our time is up on Rock and Roll Fridays. Hearing stories about Toots and the Maytals and meeting Toots Hibbert is awesome. Hearing Matt talk about what it's like to play music and his philosophy on music is great. Hearing Matt talk about New Jersey Penn and the importance of media in today's world is awesome. So, Matt, I thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I'm sure when we get back to the regular times, we'll be raising a glass together soon.
Awesome. Rock and Roll Fridays.